Jessica Goose here with RealAgriculture.com. Now, recent news reports that I've been seeing, including one today on August 2nd, is that West Nile virus is still a thing in Canada, and Manitoba had its first case of a human virus found, or it was recorded today, and they're thinking that the child came across it at the beginning of July. Now, that being said, I want to know how this relates to the farm and how potentially your horses or your cattle or sheep for that matter could come across this virus. Now, joining me is Dr. Tasha Epp, who is an associate professor in the Department of Large Animal Clinical Sciences at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine up in Saskatchewan. Thanks so much for joining me, Dr. Epp.
No problem.
So, what are we seeing right now in the prairies for this year? Is West Nile a concern for animals?
Well, so far this year, we're probably in the early stages of when we might start seeing cases, particularly in animals and humans. But so far to date, at least based on reports from public health in the different provinces, there have been positive mosquito pools. So they generally use mosquitoes as a way of being able to showcase whether the virus is present in an area or not. And definitely the virus is present on the prairies. But we so far are just probably in the early stages of when we might see clinical cases.
Mm-hmm. And what have we seen, I guess, in years past? So is it uncommon to be at zero right now?
It would not be uncommon. Definitely the two biggest years that we've had on the prairies, 2003 and 2007, we had a number of cases that were identified sort of in the later part of July. But in other years when we have had a lot less cases, it's probably been into August when we've started to see our first cases.
Gotcha. Now, what would be some of these clinical signs that you might see in your horse, cattle, or sheep?
Okay. Particularly to start with, I would say that cattle, so far we have no evidence to date that you will actually see clinical symptoms in cattle. It's not to say that the cattle might not be exposed to the virus, but so far we have no evidence that they will actually develop the symptoms. Horses are the biggest one. Definitely in all the years, we have seen clinical cases in horses. In fact, when it first showed up in New York in the 1999, there were a significant number of horse cases that were occurring at the same time as human cases. So horses, what you might look for, them being unsteady on their feet, perhaps having a weakness of their limbs or even a paralysis of their limbs where they can't actually get up off the ground. Some of them you will find that they'll have sort of tremors across their body and that sort of thing. Those are the very, very severe symptoms. The most severe would be that you might go out and find your horse dead on the pasture. Nobody likes to see that, but it occasionally will happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, that's a very minor subset of the horses will actually have those types of symptoms. The majority of horses, just similar to how it works in people, the majority of animals may actually have no symptoms whatsoever. So although they've been exposed to the virus, their body develops antibodies and they are just fine. And there may be even a smaller segment of horses that may develop something like a depression, a loss of appetite, maybe even a fever, but we don't generally recognize a lot of those. You may see them on pasture, but people don't necessarily call a veterinarian in those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, kind of horses are a little bigger than humans, so they could maybe tough it out there. And what about sheep? I think you said
Sure.
they might have it as well or be able to get it?
There has been reported cases of what we would class as neurological symptoms, so the weakness, paralysis, some brain type symptoms in sheep, but it is fairly rare.
As a producer, how would you go about preventing West Nile in your animals?
A lot of the different websites from the different provincial groups. So if you were actually to go on to something like Alberta Health or Saskatchewan, both Health or Agriculture as well, and Manitoba, all three of those will give you some pretty good ideas and ways to prevent, both for yourself or for your horses. Some of them will talk about reducing standing water, or they'll talk about, for horses, different places have talked about mosquito sprays or fans in barns or mosquito netting or stuff like that. And they're very transient ways of preventing exposure to the mosquitoes that might be carrying the virus. However, if you think about a horse being out on pasture 24 hours a day, you're not going to be able to protect them 100% just by using some of those measures. They will be helpful, but they won't be 100% effective. So on the other side of things, we have vaccines for horses, and they are quite effective. Presently, I think on the market there are 2 available, and you can contact your veterinarian. They're available that either the owner or a veterinarian can come out and give that to the horse.
Gotcha. And just like you would if you saw these symptoms, you would call your vet regardless, right?
For sure. I mean, a lot of people, if they see their horse unable to get up, the first person they're going to call is their veterinarian to figure out what's going on.
So prevention is key, and especially with vaccinations. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Epp, for taking the time out of your day to speak with me about this.
Not a problem.
Take care.